Okay, welcome to my YouTube channel. Um, it's certain because it's impossible. I'm laughing because I just went through back and forth in my mind whether I should share this on Facebook. Why? Well, because out of my 2,000 and some friends, there's people that know I do A Course in Miracles, and there's lots of them that don't even know what A Course in Miracles is. There's guys that I've studied the Course in Miracles with, if you want to call it that, and guys that used to do the course maybe don't have an affinity for the course anymore. All kinds of stuff, It's just kind of the idea that, do I really throw this out here, throw it out on Facebook? Is it appropriate to put it on Facebook? And it's really, I'm interested in other things, of course, but to me, this is probably the most important thing. Not probably, it is the most important thing to me. And there's always a fear of being judged or whatever, the idea that yeah, they're all ideas anyways. So so what I would like is, if anybody is interested in A Course in Miracles, contact me, because and you can do that through my email, matthewland10@hotmail.com. If this isn't for you, you're going to find out pretty quick, and just turn it off, change the channel, go watch something else. If it is for you, then contact me, because I want to migrate to Zoom. I also would like feedback. I'd also like, believe it or not, questions. I don't think I thought I'd ever be saying that, but any questions that you'd have on A Course in Miracles, or anything else for that matter. Maybe when we do the first Zoom, we could even do just a plain Q&A, question and answer period. The last couple classes, I've been reading straight out of A Course in Miracles. Yeah, this is a particular method called the mind training, to train your mind in a systematic way to see differently than the way you see now, or the way a human consciousness would view the world and everything else, and even its own thoughts. So I've been involved in this for quite a while. There's all kinds of different teachers out there. I'm just one particular teacher that felt the necessity to do this again. I did quite a few. Actually, we had over 100 and some thousand, maybe 150,000 views or downloads, or whatever you want to call it, on Spreaker. And I had a Spreaker channel too, which didn't have quite that many views. The one that had the 150,000 views was in Spanish. So we've been doing this for quite a while. I stepped back from it completely because I just didn't know if anybody was interested. I have found recently, even in this short period of time, that people that have listened to me in the past were happy to see that I'm doing videos again. So this also helps me, because I forget. I've been involved at looking at cryptocurrencies for the last year. I have my own painting business. So in the summer, I was very busy with that, staining houses and painting. And now I have free time, and now I have this urge to share this. I hate to reduce it to a book, but I'm going to reduce it to a book, to share the ideas of A Course in Miracles. Course in Miracles is not like anything else I've ever read, and believe me, I've read tons and tons of books. That's all I did from the age of, probably, even when I was 13, I was reading books like Hermann Hesse. But I really turned up the heat at the age of 20. So I read probably from 20 to 35, everything I could get my hands on, anything to do with truth and spirituality, and it all led me to this. So this and a 12-step program. So without further ado, I'm going to read some and then express express the ideas that are in here. Judgment and the authority problem. Right off the bat, I'm going to tell you that Course in Miracles is this will flush some people out right away. Course in Miracles is a God dependency program. It's a spiritual program. I'm going to mention this because it says judgment and the authority problem. It says the root of all error is the authority problem. And that's the idea that you created yourself and there's no God. And again, I don't know what God is. It's a symbol that I use to express the creator or creative intelligence. And but I know that I didn't create myself. So there's a cause, and I'm its effect. So let's just put it that way. And because I have an authority problem with it, which is an authorship problem, that I think that I can be separate from my creator. And yet, if there is a creator and my very life is what God is, that would be pretty hard for me to do. So, but it seems like I've done it. It seems like I've separated myself from Source, or left the Garden of Eden, or however you want to express it. And I find myself now encapsulated in a body separate from all of you and separate from my creator. We have already discussed the Last Judgment, but in insufficient detail. But in insufficient detail, not sufficient, insufficient. After the Last Judgment, there will be no more. Judgment is symbolic because beyond perception, there is no judgment. When the Bible says, "Judge not, that ye be not judged," it means that if you judge the reality of others, you will be unable to avoid judging your own. Isn't that the truth? The choice to judge rather than to know is the cause of the loss of peace. Isn't that amazing? So the goal of the Course in Miracles is peace. That means the absence of conflict, the absence of war. The choice to judge rather than to know is the cause of the loss of peace. Judgment is the process on which perception, but not knowledge, rests. I've discussed this before in terms of the selectivity of perception, pointing out that evaluation is its obvious prerequisite. Judgment always involves rejection. It never emphasizes only the positive aspects of what is judged, whether in you or in others. What has been perceived and rejected or judged and found wanting remains in your mind because it has been perceived. One of the illusions from which you suffer is the belief that what you judged has no effect. This cannot be true unless you also believe that what you judged against does not exist. You evidently do not believe this, or you would not have judged against it. Yeah, funny, we have the idea that God judges, and I think it's somewhere in the Bible says, "I've left all judgment unto man." And there's another line in the Course in the Teacher's Manual. It says, "To judge is to be dishonest." Either way, you are placing your belief in the unreal. This cannot be avoided in any type of judgment because it implies the belief that reality is yours to choose from. You have no idea the tremendous release and deep peace that comes from meeting yourself and your brothers totally without judgment. When you recognize what you are and what your brothers are, you will realize that judging them in any way is without meaning. Right? This is why the Course in Miracles isn't popular. Why isn't it popular? Because we're all judging. We're judging all the time. Looking outside yourself, you're making judgments in the first couple seconds of this video. You made a judgment when you saw the YouTube post. In fact, their meaning is lost to you precisely because you're judging them. All certainty comes from the belief that you are under the coercion of judgment. You do not need judgment to organize your life, and you certainly do not need it to organize yourself. In the presence of knowledge, all judgment is automatically suspended, and this is the process that enables recognition to replace perception. And it's important, if you're interested in this course, to read the what I just read before yesterday and the day before, because it's all about perception. And to perceive is nothing I see means anything, because you've given everything all the meaning it has. So you can't perceive truly, because you're just seeing you're judging based on partial knowledge, and the sense is not to know. And I'm not going to get into that. I can get into a whole thing, but I don't want to sound like a broken record. You are very fearful of everything you've perceived, but have refused to accept. You believe that because you refuse to accept it, you have lost control over it. This is why you see it in nightmares or in pleasant disguises in what seems to be your happier dreams. Nothing that you have refused to accept can be brought into awareness. It is not dangerous in itself, but you have made it seem dangerous to you, right? That's the problem as a human being. I'm afraid. I feel like that I can be threatened at any moment. When you feel tired, it's because you have judged yourself as capable of being tired. When you laugh at someone, it is because you have judged him as unworthy. When you laugh at yourself, you must laugh at others, if only because you cannot tolerate the idea of being more unworthy than they are. All this makes you feel tired because it is essentially disheartening. You're not really capable of being tired, but you are very capable of wearying yourself. The strain of constant judgment is virtually intolerable. It is curious that an ability so debilitating would be so deeply cherished. Yet, if you wish to be the author of reality, you will insist on holding on to judgment. You also regard judgment with fear, believing that it will someday be used against you. This belief can exist only in the extent that you believe in the efficacy of judgment as a weapon of defense for your own authority. God offers only mercy. Your words should reflect only mercy, because that is what you have received and that is what you should give, right? Does it look like, because we're in the United States and we're having an election on Tuesday, you can read all the comments on YouTube of for and against each party. Does it seem like there's any mercy that's being practiced amongst the people of this nation? I'll read it again. God offers only mercy. Your words should reflect only mercy, because that is what you have received, and that is what you should give. Justice is a temporary expedient or an attempt to teach you the meaning of mercy. It is judgmental only because you are capable of injustice. I have spoke of different symptoms, and at that level there is almost endless variation. There is, however, only one cause for all of them. Here it is: the authority problem. This is the root of all evil. Every symptom the ego makes involves a contradiction in terms, because the mind is split between the ego and the Holy Spirit. I'm going to say this again. The Holy Spirit is also referred to as your right mind. So your mind is split between the ego and your right mind, the Holy Spirit, so that whatever the ego makes is incomplete and contradictory. This untenable position is the result of the authority problem, which, because it accepts the one inconceivable thought as its premise, can produce only ideas that are inconceivable. And I always say, if you start with a false premise, everything that proceeds from that premise will also be false. The issue of authority is really a question of authorship. When you have an authority problem, it is always because you believe you are the author of yourself and project your delusion onto others, and you project your delusion onto others. You then perceive the situation as one in which others are literally fighting you for your authorship. This is the fundamental error of all those who believe they have usurped the power of God. And that's where all fear stems from. It's the idea that I have usurped the power of God, that I have usurped the throne of God. This belief is very frightening to them. but hardly troubles God. He is forever eager that it makes them unhappy. I'm sorry. He is forever eager to undo it, not to punish his children, but only because he knows that it makes them unhappy. God's creations are given their true authorship, but you prefer to be anonymous when you choose to separate yourself from your author. Right? Like, do anything in the world, but don't make a total commitment to God. Do anything in the world, but make a total commitment to truth or to peace, right? Because you're considered a fanatic when you do what I'm doing, right? When you start teaching the Course in Miracles every day, or you're trying to share, uh, yeah, you're trying to share this particular type of message. It's not very popular, and I don't blame people because there's also everyone else out there trying to share a message, and everyone's running around saying, "Hey, look, I have the truth. I have the truth." All I'm saying is look at it with an open and reasonable mind and make up your own mind. Give it a moment. Give it a chance. Being uncertain of your true authorship, you believe that your creation was anonymous. This leaves you in a position where it sounds meaningful to believe that you created yourself. The dispute over authorship has left such uncertainty in your mind that it may even doubt whether you really exist at all. Only those who give over all desire to reject can know that their own rejection is impossible. And amazing. So I got to stop rejecting aspects of myself, which is what? My shadowy figures, you, people. Only those who give over all desire to reject can know that their own rejection is impossible. You have not usurped the power of God, but you have lost it. Fortunately, to lose something does not mean that it has gone. It merely means that you do not remember where it is. Its existence does not depend on your ability to identify it or even to place it. It is possible to look on reality without judgment and merely know that it is there. Peace is a natural heritage of spirit. Everyone is free to refuse to accept his inheritance, but he is not free to establish what his inheritance is. So peace is your inheritance. The goal of the Course is peace. I like this because you can even look in the Bible and it refers to Jesus as the Prince of Peace. So this is your inheritance. Do you want to accept it or you want to reject it? The problem everyone must decide is the fundamental question of authorship. All fear comes ultimately and sometimes by way of very devious routes from the denial of authorship. The offense is never to God, but only to those who deny him, right? And it's not because God's punishing you for denying him. To deny his authorship is to deny yourself the reason for your peace so that you see yourself only in segments. There's a lesson in the Course that says there is no peace except the peace of God. The strange perception is the authority problem. There is no one who does not feel that he is imprisoned in some way, especially now with all the mandates of wearing a mask and where you can go, where you can't go, and maybe you're on lockdown. And even before that, you're only free of the extent of the laws that you live under, right? You can't do anything you want at any moment. There is no one who does not feel that he's imprisoned in some way. If this is the result of his own free will, he must regard his will as not free, or the circular reasoning in this position would be quite apparent. Free will must lead to freedom. Judgment always imprisons because it separates segments of reality by the unstable scales of desire. Wishes are not facts. To wish is to imply that willing is not sufficient. Yet no one in his right mind believes that what is wished is real as what is willed. Instead, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. Say, will ye first the kingdom of heaven? And you have said, I know what I am and I accept my own inheritance, right? Because the Course in Miracles, I mean, if God's will for you is perfect happiness and he just wants you to be at peace, why would I argue with that? Why wouldn't I just say, my will, my Father's will and mine are one? That I want the same thing that God wants for me. Right? I mean, Why, and if, why wouldn't I want that for you? Why wouldn't I want that for my relatives? Why wouldn't I want that for my own kids? Every system of thought must have a starting point. It begins with either a making or creating. The title of this section is Creating versus the Self-Image. This is chapter 3, in case you want to look it up. It begins with either making or creating, a difference we have already discussed. The resemblance lies in their power as foundations. Their difference lies in what rests upon them. Both are cornerstones for systems of belief by which one lives. It is a mistake to believe that a thought system based on lies is weak. Nothing made by a child of God is without power. It is essential to realize this because otherwise you'll be unable to escape from the prison that you have made. You cannot resolve the authority problem by depreciating the power of the mind. To do so is to deceive yourself, and this will hurt you because you really understand the strength of the mind. You also realize that you cannot weaken it any more than you can weaken God. So your mind is one of the most powerful things in the universe. I mean, come on, everything starts from a thought in your mind. The devil is a frightening concept because he seems to be extremely powerful and extremely active. He is perceived as a force in combat with God, battling him for possession of his creations. The devil deceives by lies and builds kingdoms in which everything is in direct opposition to God. Yet he attracts men rather than repels them, and they are willing to sell him their souls to return for gifts for no real worth. This makes absolutely no sense. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. That it doesn't make any sense. We have discussed, I can't even, I don't even want to explain it because it's pretty apparent that why would God have a nemesis that was fighting him over your soul, and then he would let you come down here and then prove your worth through sacrifice and suffering and obedience, that you could earn your way to heaven. That doesn't even coincide with the idea of grace, or this is done for you. We have discussed the fall or separation before, but its meaning must be clearly understood. The separation is a system of thought real enough in time, though not in eternity. All beliefs are real to the believer. The fruit of only one tree was forbidden in the symbolic garden, but God could not have forbidden it, or it could not have been eaten. If God knows his children, and I assure you that he does, would he have put them in a position where their own destruction was possible? The forbidden tree was named the tree of knowledge, yet God created knowledge and gave it freely to his creations, right? As if God held something back from you and made it a tree and a tempting fruit. The symbolism here has been given many interpretations, but you may be sure that any interpretation that sees either God or his creations as capable of destroying their own purpose is in error. Eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge is a symbolic expression for usurping the ability for self-creating. This is the only sense in which God and his creations are not co-creators. The belief that they are is implicit in the self-concept, or the tendency of the self to make an image of itself. Images are perceived, not known. Knowledge cannot deceive, but perception can. You can perceive yourself as self-creating, but you cannot do more than believe it. You cannot make it true, right? So you didn't create yourself. And as I said before, when you finally perceive correctly, you can only be glad that you cannot. Until then, however, the belief that you can is the foundation stone in your thought system. And all your defenses are used to attack ideas that might bring it to light, right? This is why this message is rejected on such a large scale. I mean, it's just like, it's very rare to find anybody that wants to hear this message. And yet they're out there. I was one of them. I am still one of them. I got to read that again. So, yeah, you think you're self-creating, that you can create yourself and that there's no God. And it's the foundation stone in your thought system. And you defend it with everything you have. Your mind is split with the Holy Spirit on this point, and there's no resolution while you believe the one thing that is literally inconceivable. That is why you cannot create, are filled with fear about what you make. The mind can make the belief in separation very real and very fearful, and this belief is the devil. It is powerful, active, destructive, and clearly in opposition to God because it literally denies his fatherhood. Look at your life and see what the devil has made, but realize that this making will surely dissolve in the light of truth. Yeah, maybe your life, if you would be honest and look at the past, maybe your life's going to been a complete disaster, and yet you keep on keeping on. You keep doing exactly what you did before instead of coming to an absolute point of surrender. But realize this making will surely dissolve in the light of truth because its foundation is a lie. Your creation by God is the only foundation that cannot be shaken because the light is in it. Your starting point is truth, and you must return to your beginning. Much has been seen since then, but nothing has really happened. Your self, your true self, is still in peace, even though your mind is in conflict. You have not yet gone back far enough, and that is why you become so fearful. As you approach the beginning, you feel the fear of the destruction of your thought system upon you as if it were the fear of death. There is no death, but there is a belief in death. The branch that bears no fruit will be cut off and will wither away. Be glad. The light will shine from the true foundation of life, and your own thought system will stand corrected. It cannot stand otherwise. You who fear salvation are choosing death. Life and death, light and darkness, knowledge and perception are irreconcilable. To believe that they can be reconciled is to believe that God and his Son cannot. Only the oneness of knowledge is free of conflict. Only the oneness of knowledge is free of conflict. Your kingdom is not of this world because it was given you from far beyond this world. Only in this world is the idea of an authority problem meaningful. The world is not left by death, but by truth, and truth can be known by all those whom the kingdom was created and for whom it waits. Right? Just like Jesus told his disciples, in my Father's houses are many mansions. This isn't your home. Chapter 4, The Illusions of Ego, Introduction. The Bible says that you should go with a brother twice as far as he asks. It certainly does not suggest that you set him back on his journey. Devotion to a brother cannot set you back either. It can lead only to mutual progress. The result of genuine devotion is inspiration. A word which properly understood is the opposite of fatigue. To be fatigued is to be dispirited, but to be inspired is to be in the spirit. To be egocentric is to be dispirited, but to be self-centered in the right sense is to be inspired or in spirit. Self-centered meaning capital S, not the selfish and self-centeredness. The truly inspired are enlightened and cannot abide in darkness. You can speak from the spirit or from the ego as you choose. If you speak from spirit, you have chosen to be still and know that I'm God. These words are inspired because they reflect knowledge. If you speak from the ego, you are disclaiming knowledge instead of affirming it and are thus dispiriting yourself. Do not embark on useless journeys because they are indeed in vain. The ego may desire them, but spirit cannot embark on them because it's forever unwilling to depart from its foundation. The journey to the cross should be the last useless journey. Do not dwell upon it, but dismiss it as accomplished. If you can accept it as your own last useless journey, you are also free to join my resurrection. I was just going to say that. It's like too many Christians are focused on the crucifixion, and that's not what happened. What happened was, yeah, he was crucified, but the solution was he was resurrected. He showed death, where's your sting? You'll tear down the temple in 3 days. I'll raise it up. Until you do so, your life is indeed wasted. It is so funny. Until you do so, your life is indeed wasted. It merely reenacts the separation, loss of power, the futile attempts of the ego at reparation, and finally the crucifixion of the body or death. Such repetitions are endless until they are voluntarily given up. Do not make the pathetic error of clinging to the old rugged cross, right? Clinging to the old rugged cross is the belief that you can get something through sacrifice and suffering. Not true. The only message of the crucifixion is that you can overcome the cross. Until then, you are free to crucify yourself as often as you choose. And you do crucify yourself and have been crucifying yourself. This is not the gospel I intended to offer. We have another journey to undertake, and if you will read these lessons carefully, they will help prepare you to undertake it. Oh boy, here it is. I say oh boy because this is my favorite section, and I didn't know I was going to get to it today. And it's much better in the Urtext version than it is in the this section. So give me one moment. I'm going to look up the Urtext version, which is www.courseinmiracles.com, and then I'm going to just go to Right Teaching, Right Learning. This is what's great about this. It's searchable. Right Teaching and Right Learning. And I have read this over and over and over and over and over again. Okay, here it is. All right, so, you know, if you have the regular blue book, the edited version, you can look at that. It says, we have spoken of the many different human symptoms at this level. There's almost endless variation, but there's only one cause from them all. Okay, so I read that. I got to go down and find out because they titled the section differently. So you got to realize when he was talking to the this is so funny because I know people are just going, what the hell? So when Helen Schuckman heard this voice, she heard a voice and she started dictating the Course in Miracles. She was I believe a psychologist or psychiatrist in New York, and Bill Thetford was someone who worked in her office, and he helped her compile the notes and encouraged her to keep going because she was kind of freaked out by the whole thing. Because again, what she was writing down, she obviously didn't believe. It was channeled material, as hard as that is to believe. So I have to mention Bill because in the Urtext version, it's Bill and Helen are mentioned. So so I'll start here maybe. It says, Bill could not be afraid to teach unless he still believes that interaction means loss and that learning means separation. He stands guard over his own ideas because he wants to protect his thought system as it is, and learning means change. Learning means change. What does Jesus say? Listen, learn, and do. So yes, there's a change. There's a transformation that takes place. Change is always fearful to the separated because they cannot conceive of it as a change toward healing the separation. They always perceive it as a change for further separation because separation was the first experience of change. So this is why people are terrified of change, right? They get a routine and they don't ever want to deviate from that particular routine. Bill, your whole fear of teaching is nothing but an example of your own intense separation anxiety, which you have handled with the usual series of mixed defenses and the combined pattern of attack on truth and defense of error, which characterizes all ego thinking, right? And this is the idea that someone will argue with you over these ideas. They're defending their position, even if their position may be wrong. In a lot of cases, it is. You insist that if you know no change to enter the ego, your soul will find peace. This profound confusion is possible only if one maintains that the same thought system can stand on two foundations, right? So you think that you can find peace by not allowing peace to enter, that you can rely on the false self or the self concept to find peace. Nothing can reach the soul from the ego, right? Not the Remember I said that I think I said the soul or the spirit was already perfect. So nothing can reach the soul from the ego, and nothing from the soul can strengthen the ego or reduce the conflict within. The ego is a contradiction. Man self and God self are in opposition. They are opposed in creation and will and outcome. They are fundamentally irreconcilable because the soul cannot perceive and the ego cannot know, right? The ego perceives, the soul already knows. Knowledge comes from God. They are therefore not in communication and can never be in communication, right? So it's certain because it's impossible. Well, it's impossible that I could be this ego identity, that I could be separate from what everything is, that I could be separate from God, and yet I maintain that position in my own mind. Nevertheless, the ego can learn because its maker can be misguided, but cannot make the totally lifeless out of the life given. The soul need not to be taught, but the ego must. Right? So who's learning the Course in Miracles? The ego. Your ego. The thing that was going to edge God out. Ego stands for edging God out. The thing that has an authority problem. The thing that thinks it's self-created. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. You start to realize, oh, maybe it isn't that complicated. The soul need not be taught, but the ego must. The ultimate reason why learning or teaching is perceived as frightening is because the true learning does lead to the relinquishment, right? The relinquishment. I let it go, not destruction of the ego to the light of the soul. This is the change the ego must fear because it does not share my charity. My lesson was like yours, and because I learned it, I can teach it. I never attack your egos. And listen to what he says, in spite of Helen's strange belief on the contrary. So the woman who wrote the Course in Miracles has different ideas other than the ones that she's dictating. But I do try to teach them how their thought system have arisen. When I remind you of your true creation, your egos cannot but respond with fear, right? So, of course, you get a hold of A Course in Miracles, you get an increase in fear, right? Because that thing doesn't have any foundation, doesn't have a leg to stand on. It's confused about everything. Ego is what confusion is. And what is the ego's chosen home? The seat of fear, the body. Something also that won't last. Here it is. Bill, teaching and learning are your greatest strengths now because you must change your mind and help others change theirs. Holy smokes. So I could put my name in there. Matt, teaching and learning are your greatest strengths now because you must change your mind and help others change theirs. And you can also place your name in there. It is pointless to refuse to tolerate change or changing because you believe that you can demonstrate by doing so that the separation never occurred. The dreamer who doubts the reality of his dream while he's still dreaming is not healing the level split, right? So that's what the Course in Miracles teaches, that you're the dreamer of the dream. And, you know, you're dreaming. The dreamer, you spend all your time dreaming. The dreamer who doubts the reality of his dream while he's still dreaming is not healing the level split. You have dreamed of a separated ego and you have believed in a world which rested upon it. This is very real to you. You cannot undo this by doing nothing and not changing. I love this. I mean, a lot of this stuff isn't even in the edited version. That's why I'm not even looking at this book now. I've switched over here. If you're willing to renounce the role of guardians of your thought system and open them to me, I will correct them very gently and lead you home. Every good teacher hopes to give his students so much of his own thinking that they will one day no longer need him. They're right? What the heck? If you learn this, you don't need me or someone else like me anymore. You know it for yourself. Then we can rejoice together. Oh, that we found a solution, or there's a singular purpose that we both share. This is the one real goal of the parent, teacher, and therapist. This goal will not be achieved by those who believe that they will lose their child or pupil or patient if they succeed. It is impossible to convince the ego of this because it goes against all its own laws. But remember that laws are set up to protect the continuity of the system in which the lawmaker believes. It is natural enough for the ego to try to protect itself once you've made it, but it's not natural for you to want to obey its laws unless you believe in them, right? What's the ego want for you? It just wants your own death, your own annihilation. The ego cannot make this choice because of the nature of its origin, but you can because of the nature of yours. Egos can clash in any situation, but souls cannot clash at all. If you perceive a teacher as merely a larger ego, you will be afraid because to enlarge an ego is to increase separation anxiety. Do not engage in this foolishness. Bill, I will teach with you and live with you if you will think with me. God goes with me wherever I go. God goes with me wherever I go. I am among the ministers of God. But my goal will always be to absolve you finally from the need for a teacher, right? No exchange going on here. I want to communicate with you and start a Zoom group so we can speed up time so we can get to this part where you don't have a need of a teacher anymore. This is the opposite of the ego-oriented teacher's goal. He is concerned with his effect of his ego on other egos, and therefore interprets their interaction as a means of ego preservation. This is in no sense true if he's afraid to teach than if he's frankly out to dominate through teaching. The form of the symptom is only a reflection of this particular way of handling the separation anxiety. All separation anxiety is a symptom of continuing will to remain separated, right? So I have a new purpose, and that is to join with my brothers. Unity is the solution. If separation is the problem, unity would have to be the solution. This cannot be repeated too often because you've not learned it. Here it is. Bill, you are afraid to teach only because you're afraid of the impression your image of yourself will make on other images. You believe that their approval of your image will exalt you, but also that your separation anxiety will be increased. You also believe that their disapproval of it will lessen the separation anxiety, but at the cost of depression. All right, if everybody would be honest, and I can be honest, right? So I said in the beginning of this, oh, I was afraid to put this on Facebook because of what other people would think and stuff like that. Why? Because I do have a self concept. I do have an image, all right? I do have an ego, and yet I have to get to the point where I don't care about that anymore. That you're going to think what you're going to think about me, and I'm still going to deliver the message because this is what I'm really here for, right? Yeah, and that's just silly, 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 silly. That I would be afraid of the impression of my image to make on other images. And that if I get your approval, if you say, oh, you're such a great teacher, that's going to increase in separation anxiety, but because it's going to make us unequal. And I also believe that the disapproval will, like if you disapprove of my teaching, that it'll lessen the separation anxiety, but I'll be depressed because I suck as a teacher. You know what I mean? There this idea of being bad at something, not good enough, which will increase the idea of being unworthy. And it's like, no, I don't want to be a slave to those ideas. I would not be able to devote myself to teaching if I believed either of these ideas. And you will not be a devoted teacher yourself as long as you maintain them. So I reject those ideas. If you like the teaching, great. Keep on listening. If you don't like it, don't listen to it. Simple as that. If you want to teach and you don't like what I'm teaching, then open up a channel and teach yourself. I'm constantly being perceived as a teacher either to be exalted or rejected, but I do not accept either perception for myself. Your own worth is not established by your teaching. Your worth was established by God. As long as you dispute this, everything you do will be fearful. Right? So what am I discovering through A Course in Miracles? That my worth is established by God, and he deems me worthy, and he sees my worth as immeasurable. This is how a man should think of himself. This is how you should think of yourself. Everything you do will be fearful, and particularly any situation that lends itself to the superior inferiority fallacy. Teachers must be patient and repeat their lessons until they're learned. I'm willing to do so because I have no right to set your learning limits for you. If you don't know what the superior inferiority fallacy is, look up superior inferiority on Google, and then you'll figure it out. Teachers must be patient and repeat their lessons until they're learned. I'm willing to do so because I have no right to set your learning limits for you. So Jesus will wait as long as it takes because he can't set any learning limit for you. It takes you as long as it takes, you know. And if you stop or just say the hell with it, then you'll return just to start where you left off once again. Once again, nothing you do or think or will or make is necessary to establish your worth. This point is not debatable except in delusions. Your ego is never at stake because God did not create it. Your soul is never at stake because he did. Any confusion on this point is a delusion, and no form of devotion is possible as long as this delusion lasts. Bill, if you will be a devoted teacher rather than an egocentric one, you will not be afraid. The teaching situation is fearful if it is misused as ego involvement. If you become afraid, it's because you're using it this way. But the devoted teacher perceives the situation as it is and not as he wills it. He does not see it as dangerous because he's not exploiting it. Anybody who teaches A Course in Miracles should read this over and over and over and over again. And the other thing that I would recommend reading, because you're free to do whatever you want, is the psychotherapy article where it talks about payment. Bill, again, I tell you that when you're afraid, be still and know that God is real and you are his beloved son in whom he's well pleased. Do not let your ego dispute this because the ego cannot know what is far beyond its reach as you are. God is not the author of fear, you are. Right? That affirms what I read a couple days ago where it says you're responsible for your own fear because God's not the author of it. You have willed, therefore, to create unlike him, and you have made fear for yourselves. You are not at peace because you're not fulfilling your function. God gave you a very lofty responsibility which you're not meeting. You know this and you're afraid. But your egos have chosen to be afraid of it instead of meeting it. When you awaken, you will not be able to understand this because it's literally incredible. You know, I feel the same way. It's just like, okay, here I am in space and time. I went to a place where I discovered a tremendous experience and underwent an incredible, whatever you want to call it, transformation, and continue to undergo it. I'm undergoing it right now as I read all this, because it's a decision. This is my decision, and yet I have a very lofty responsibility. And he's saying you're not meeting it and you know it and you're afraid, but your egos have chosen to be afraid of instead of stepping up, instead of meeting it. Do not believe the incredible now. Any attempt to increase its believableness is merely to postpone the inevitable. The word inevitable is fearful to the ego, but joyous to the soul. Here it is. God is inevitable and you cannot avoid him any more than he can avoid you. The ego is afraid of the soul's joy because once you have experienced this, you will withdraw all protection from the ego and become totally without investment in fear. And if you're in fear, you're obviously in conflict too, and you can't be at peace, you can't be in love. Your investment is great now because fear is a witness to the separation, and your ego rejoices when you witness to it. Leave it behind, do not listen to it, and do not preserve it. Listen only to God, who is incapable of deception as the souls he created. As teachers and therapists, release yourselves and release others. Do not present a false and other unworthy picture of yourselves to others. To accept such a picture, here we go again. I've been doing this the last 3 days that I've taught and just swallowing my own words, tripping all over my own words. Do not present a false and unworthy picture of yourselves to others or accept such a picture of them yourselves. The ego has built a shabby and unsheltering home for you because it cannot build otherwise. Do not try to make this impoverished house stand. Its weakness is your strength. Only God could make a home that was worthy of his creations, who have chosen to leave it empty by their own dispossession. His home will stand forever and is ready for you when you choose to enter. Of this you can be wholly certain. God is incapable of creating the perishable as your ego is of making the eternal. God is incapable of creating the perishable as your ego is of making the eternal. Of your egos, you could do nothing to save yourselves of others, but of your souls, you can do everything for the salvation of both. Humility is a lesson for the ego, not for the soul. The soul is beyond humility because it recognizes its radiance and gladly sheds its light everywhere. The meek shall inherit the earth because their egos are humble, and this gives them better perception. The kingdom of heaven is the right of the soul, whose beauty and dignity are beyond doubt, beyond perception, and stand forever as the mark of the love of God for his creations, who are wholly worthy of him and only of him. Nothing else is sufficiently worthy to be the gift for a creation of God himself. I will substitute for your ego if you will, right? So I will substitute for your ego if you want, but never for your soul. A father can safely leave a child with an elder brother who has shown himself responsible, but this involves no confusion about the child's origin. The brother can protect the child's body and his ego, which are very closely associated, but he does not confuse himself with the father because he does this, although the child may. The reason why I can be entrusted with your body and your egos is simply because this enables you not to be concerned with them and me to teach you their unimportance. I could not understand their importance to you if I had not once been tempted to believe in them myself. Let us undertake to learn this lesson together so we can also be free of them together. What do we want to be free of? The ego identification and the body identification. I need devoted teachers. They heal the mind, and that is always my own aim. The soul is far beyond the need for your protection or mine. The biblical quotation should read, "In this world you need not have tribulation, because I have overcome the world. That is why you should be of good cheer." So he says, Bill's course was very carefully chosen because abnormal psychology is ego psychology. This is precisely the kind of content which should never be taught from the ego, whose abnormality should be lessened by teaching, not increased. You, Bill, are particularly well suited to perceive the difference and then can therefore teach this course as it should be taught. This is a real wake-up call. Listen to that idea that you can therefore teach this course as it should be taught. Most teachers, here it is, most teachers have an unfortunate tendency to teach the course abnormally. and many of its students are apt to suffer considerable perceptual distortions because of their own authority problem, right? And this is where I really have to check in. It's like, okay, what's my intention? What is this for? Your teaching assignment, I assure you it's an assignment, will be to present perceptual distortions without either engaging in them yourself or encouraging your students to do so. This interpretation of your role and theirs is too charitable to induce fear. If you adhere to this role, you will both engender and experience hope, and you will inspire rather than dispirit the future teachers and therapists I'm entrusting to you. I promise to attend myself, and you should at least credit me with some dependability in keeping my own promises. I never make them lightly because I know the need my brothers have for trust. So your teaching assignment will be to present perceptual distortions, right? So we present what what we're dealing with in space and time, and then, right, it's like we read stuff like, I will not value the valuable from the valueless, the valueless from the valuable. So then I have to figure out, based on what is in the text of that lesson, what I am valuing that has no value. So that would be considered a perceptual distortion, wouldn't it? Having an idol, a substitute for God, would be a perceptual distortion. Judging based on my eyes and ears and being in perception would be perceptual distortion. So I need true perception. I need a correction of that perception. So I have to be vigilant and then constantly, right? This is why I'm submersing myself in this again, so I can have the true reference. So I'm not operating from the ego anymore, but I have to keep going back to the well of truth to be like, okay, let me not revert, let me not backslide, let me remember who it is that I really am and what Jesus is asking me to do. Because he told me I have a very you have a very lofty responsibility and you're not meeting it. And I want to meet that, so I have to find out what that lofty responsibility is and be about it. Like he says in the course, I'm looking for active workers. So that's just about an hour. Uh, yeah, I don't know who's going to listen to this. It's out there now. I put it on Facebook. I'm going to continue to share. I ask you to share it with guys that you think are ready for this, who are looking for an alternative. If this resonates with you, and again, if you think it should be shorter or some other format or question and answer, whatever, I'm open to hear anything. Um, I've been avoiding this talking head thing for a long time. I don't know what else to do. I don't know how else to extend a message. It seems if I did it locally, I have talked to a lot of people because of my painting business. Yeah, it's like I think most people are just not ready for it, and yet I do know that there are guys ready for it, and then some of you guys may say, "Oh, I'm already too far advanced," or whatever. I don't want to listen to what anything you have to say, and that's also fine too. I mean, I don't know. We're going to get into the teacher's manual, and it talks about the different teachers that can express this. I love that section. I probably will even put that section on Facebook, and I probably will also look again at the differences and all the stuff that was taken out of the edited version. I'm not really sure why Wapnick pulled out some of that stuff, because that one line that says most teachers have an unfortunate tendency to teach the course abnormally, and many of its students are apt to suffer considerable perceptual distortion because of their own authority problem. I believe 100% should be in that book, just as well as a lot of the other stuff that isn't in there. Should be in the original version, but whatever. It is what it is. And I'm grateful that I have the original version and I can read that and go, oh, okay. So, yeah. So have a blessed Sunday, I believe it is. And it's November Yeah, it's November 1st today. So I will do another class tomorrow, and then don't know when we're going to migrate over to Zoom. I still have a book I have to send out next week to a guy who knows who he is, and I will send that out to you. And yeah, and then hopefully we'll have some giveaways in the future. Thank you.